Mode.
Welcome everyone, my name is James Rogers and I want to welcome you to a fantastic webinar that we have set up today. We have some incredible guests and I hope that you find it very useful and informative. Today we're going to cover social selling is no longer an option, it's a necessity. You will see going forward we're going to have monthly webinars from OneSource and hopefully we'll continue to have incredible speakers and guests like we have today, and I'm very pleased to introduce today. So with that, let's get started. One thing, a little bit of housekeeping. I do want to remind everyone to use the hashtag social sales talk on Twitter. And then the other thing that I would also mention is that we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. And any questions that we don't get to at the end, we will answer those in our blog next week. So with that, let's just dive into this. Again, my name is James Rogers. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for OneSource Information Services, and I will be your host today. I'm very excited about the panelists and speakers that we have today. But before I introduce them, I did want to cover just a few things to just set the stage for the presentation today. I wanted to walk everyone through a little history here of the world that we're in today, and the fact that the world of sales and marketing has changed, and the rate of change is accelerating. I think we're all familiar with the internet and web explosion in the 90s. Changed forever how companies conduct business. CRMs have evolved from support and service to include sales, and as we've seen from the recent acquisitions with Oracle and Salesforce.com, it's now also evolving to include social and marketing automation tools. Another big change is the connectivity and the fact that we're always on, we're always connected, laptops, smartphones, tablets. Coupled with that has been the social media wave with all of the information, all the blogs, tweets, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, and many, many more. And all that information is creating a big data explosion. It's creating exponential growth in information. So what does that mean then relative to sales? So according to, I think everyone has downloaded this and everyone has reviewed it, according to Google, the zero moment of truth, everything's changed. And the sales funnel isn't a sales funnel anymore. And according to Harvard Business Review, they say 60% of the purchasing decision is now made prior to engaging the vendor. The whole buyer's journey, the whole selection process has all changed. And those are just two examples of how things have changed in the world that we're in. The other thing is tools. As we know, there's this opportunity, and all the changes creates opportunity for tools. So there are many more tools and analytics coming every day to help manage with this complexity, such as LivePerson, Bloomfire, OneSource, Marketo, Spreadfast, Brainshark. And the thing that's very interesting is all of these tools are interdependent. That I know, for example, in marketing, our marketing automation solution is synced with our CRM. Our marketing automation solution is integrated with our chat tools. All of these things have interdependencies. Everything that we do must be measured, and much more is being automated to help manage with the scale of the change that's occurring. And there's been a lot of research that's come out recently talking about the impact of social. For example, companies that blog get 55% more website visits. 57% of businesses have acquired a customer through company blogs. 67% of B2C and 41% of B2B companies have acquired a company via Facebook. And 42% of companies have acquired a customer through Twitter. So with that, I'm sorry, before I advance, I'd like to, that sets the stage for Our webinar today about social selling is no longer an option. I'd like to give a brief introduction to the three speakers that we have today. I'll start with first Nancy Nardin. And I'm sorry, these are not going to be in the order in which they're presenting, but Nancy is the president of Smart Selling Tools. She's considered the foremost expert on sales productivity tools. She's been named by OpenView Labs as one of the top 25 sales influencers for 2013 and by Top Sales World as one of the top 50 sales influencers 2 years running. Nancy is a fierce proponent of improving sales productivity through better use of sales capacity. And she uses her 215 principle, which quantifies sales capacity, to illustrate the impact tools can have on revenue. A little fun fact about Nancy is when she's not presenting like in this webinar, Nancy is also a bit bonkers for power tools. And she loves to use power tools and build cabins and other things around the house and around the property. The next presenter is Lori Richardson. Lori Richardson is recognized one of the top 25 sales influencers for 2013, one of the 20 women to watch in sales lead management for 2013. Lori speaks, writes, trains, and consults with inside and outbound sellers in technology and services companies. Subscribe to the award-winning blog and the Sales Ideas in a Minute newsletter for sales strategies, tactics, and tips. And a fun fact about Lori is that she is a fundraising auctioneer. And then the last guest that we have today is Jonathan Farrington. Jonathan is a globally recognized keynote speaker, business coach, mentor, author, consultant, and thought leader who has guided hundreds of companies and more than 100,000 frontline salespeople and sales leaders towards optimum performance levels. He is the senior partner at Jonathan Farrington and Associates and CEO of Top Sales World. A fun fact about Jonathan is he's a sports fanatic and played semi-professional soccer and cricket, Manchester United fan for 55 years. So with that, we've got an esteemed group of speakers today, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to first introduce our first speaker, Lori Richardson.
Great, thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to just dive right into my first slide, so you can just go right ahead and talk about some basics that will lead into the other speakers' presentations. And I'm going to be speaking from my viewpoint as what I've been noticing working with many sales teams, all B2B. That's the world I live in, is business to business, and a lot of mid-sized companies, but there's some larger companies and smaller companies, startups that this fits. And I think that people are learning, if they haven't seen it now, and we saw some of the stats earlier, which are very helpful. We know that most decision makers are not responding to the traditional ways of reaching people. Voicemails, although I have clients that do a lot of voicemail, a lot of calling, everyone knows that a very small percentage are going to actually turn into conversation. We know that email messaging is not as effective as it used to be. So we need to find new ways, and you know, we need to try not to be overwhelmed by all the options. And I like what James was saying earlier, just about you know, the choices are just so unlimited, and the rate of change is unbelievable. I would think most people would agree with that. And one of the analogies I think of is, I've been a networker for a long time, gone to many hundreds of networking events. And every now and then I'll go to a networking event in person and I'll feel uncomfortable just because of the situation or the scenario. And I'll think, you know, if I'm uncomfortable and I'm so used to doing this, what about the people that aren't used to it? And I use the same when it comes to looking at tools and technology and looking at ways to to prospect differently. So I'm going to be talking about working on ways to get net new business. We'll be talking about how to do it. You know, depending on the study you look at, 60 to 75% of decision makers are using social channels to help make purchasing decisions. So for nothing else, if you're not very big into social or social selling ideas, there's a good reason to look at it. And as James mentioned earlier, 57% of businesses have experienced getting new business through a blog. I mean, you see it all the time. We can go to the next slide, because how do you do it? How do you start? I just put a sampling of some of the tools that I use and I'm around. I think that, like anything, people will be, if they're busy selling and if they're busy working with sales opportunities, there's a percentage of people that just don't even want to look at this because they can't deal with it. It's too overwhelming. It's too much to think about. My suggestion is that you start small with some smart moves. Do some experimenting with your team or on your own. I know that when I tried out Twitter, for example, when I tried out other tools, I did it as an experiment, and I gave myself an amount of time, and you know, over the course of a certain amount of time, I could make a decision about whether it was effective for me or not. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to say this is actually a graphic from one source that I saw, and I thought it really elegantly ties things together, and it gives you an idea of how there's not just one place to have conversations or listen for people or to gain insight. We know that there is so much information out there that there's too much information, and it's overwhelming. It's not helpful when you just have tons and tons of, you know, what we call big data, or even if you call it small data when it comes to certain amounts of data that you're looking at. We need stuff that gives us insight about our potential customer, about our buyer that is out there looking for what we sell. And so with this model, it shows you know, what a prospector or their company needs to do is to bring all those traditionally sourced insight that we can get through you know, the old ways we've been doing business, along with crowdsourced and search behavior and social and data mined from the web all together. And then it continuously executes through this process. You know, one source has a whole system to do it. You can also, you know, you can try and cobble it together too. You know, there are different ways that people are doing it. But ultimately, we want to get context about our prospective customers and ultimately meet sales enablement needs. So the best chances for success, in my opinion, what I've seen, what's out there and happening, is that you need some sort of a process or system in place. And, you know, a lot of sellers don't have interconnected tools, and this is where it becomes a real challenge. How do I keep track of everything, one thing after another? So we can go to the next slide. I contend that the very best place to start, the best strategy, is in content creation, and to know what your customers and buyers are really in need of learning, and that's what you talk about. If you just did that in the beginning, or if you ramped it up, some people will say, well, we started a blog, but nothing really happened, or, you know, we do add content. Think of all the different ways that you could add content and have it connect back to you. For example, I think a very underused source is the updates on LinkedIn. There are many people, it makes it very easy for someone that is in your circle and your network to see that you're there, to see what you're talking about, to add to the conversation, and also you can see what other people are talking about. I think even if you're not comfortable getting further out there interacting, just listen and monitor what people are saying, and, you know, think about how you can create content that has valuable calls to action. And then the next slide, it leads up to the fact that you want to draw buyers and those wanting ideas and education, which a lot of people need, to your website, so that your website is the hub and all the social channels and everything else that you're doing out there can lead to it in one way or another. So the next slide, I'm going right through these. I want to be as quick as I can for you. But the next slide is my favorite way. This is put your efforts into a blog, into a content creation strategy. And as mentioned before, that alone can grow revenues. So that's an idea that, again, people have heard of it, we know about it, but how many people do it on a regular basis? We find companies, mid-sized companies, doing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business without putting this content strategy in place, and I think is a real missed opportunity. And let's go to the next one as I zip through here. So many different ways to connect and network with people. The goal is to find these folks online, and I like to find ways to have an offline conversation or a direct conversation where you can add value. So in other words, I'm not just going to track somebody down in a community like LinkedIn or somewhere else and then just stalk them. I'm going to learn more about them and then try to engage them maybe through a phone call, maybe through an email, maybe through a very short handwritten note. But one way or the other, I'm going to try to be a little bit different and get through to them as best I can. Next slide. My favorite combination, well, it's not peanut butter and chocolate, but Twitter and LinkedIn, I think that that's a second really great strategy that you can leverage each other, one off of the other. It works very well. I see clients and talk with companies almost every week that talk about opportunities that they've gotten through this method and have closed business as a result of that 1-2 combination. And there are too many instances to cite, but I do have some specifics. If anyone wants to contact me offline, I'd be happy to tell you. And then the next slide, my last slide, is just a little more about the ROI, which, a couple of examples. A tech company client that had a 120% revenue increase directly related to a content strategy and quick interaction with potential buyers. We know that we need to get back to people quickly as possible when they express interest, because that's the opportunity, that's the time when they are ready to talk to you, rather than you taking your time. Again, I have clients, I've seen clients where marketing will get the lead, they look through them, it takes a couple days, they'll send it to sales, and it's too late. It's too late. So quick response tied in with content strategy. Also, telecom industry client, 10 inside reps who gained an average of 50% more qualified meetings through a strategic social selling plan, and they're on track to blow away the numbers. So that's what I wanted to share, and I think it will segue into the other presentations. And again, my name is Lori Richardson. You can find me on the next slide at Score More Sales and all over the place on the web. So, and again, please contact me directly if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Lori. Really appreciate it. Again, we'll have some additional Q&A at the end of this webinar, but great slides, very relevant to the world that we're in. With that, I'd like to transition to our next speaker, is Nancy Nardin, President of Smart Selling Tools. Nancy?
Thanks, James, and thanks, Lori. That was a great overview, and it just points to the many reasons why social selling is important. But the fact of the matter is that we've always looked for ways to make a connection with prospects. I can remember back in the day sending away for annual reports so I'd be more knowledgeable about the prospect before I called. Now we have endless information at our fingertips, not just on companies, but on people. And to me, social selling is all about engaging, as Lori said, in more relevant conversations with people. And not only that, it's a great way to establish the connection with a person in the first place. But there is a downside. The downside is that it'll consume more of a salesperson's precious selling time. And here's why you're right to be concerned about social selling's impact on a salesperson's productivity. If we take a look at sales capacity on the next slide, I think about sales productivity from the perspective of capacity. James mentioned the 215 principle. And what that's all about is that we quantify that there are only 215 selling days in the year. So that's your sales capacity. Once you know that number, you can figure out what level of productivity you're operating at. 215 days is the equivalent of 1,720 hours. That sounds like a lot, but it doesn't tell the full story. Research shows that only 35% of a salesperson's time is actually spent communicating with prospects. So that means they're not spending 1,720 hours selling. They're only using 602 hours to sell. So that's the number of hours salespeople have to do what I call manufacture sales. They can't sell to more people than they can talk with during the time they spend selling. So social selling is a tool, but we need to use it in a smart way. Let's use the analogy of a production line. I'll have you go to the next slide, James. It used to be that manufacturing automobiles was a craftsman's job. Workers stayed stationary and each person managed the entire process of creating a car from start to finish. There was no way to scale production in a craftsmanship model. But the same is true in sales. We just haven't made as much progress in the way we manufacture a sale. If we make sales reps go out and manually fetch the information they need, whether it's social selling related or not, it's every bit as wasteful as switching tasks and tools was back in the day. To manufacture more than one sale at a time, salespeople constantly reassess and prioritize tasks, and they have to refocus and recalibrate their mental resources across all the different opportunities that are making their way through all of the many different sales stages. What we need is to find the right balance between automation and craftsmanship. And that didn't take long for Henry Ford and others to figure out what the first step is, or that the first step is to bring the tools to the craftsman, not the other way around. So ultimately, the goal is to fully automate certain processes in the sales manufacturing scenario so that you can actually use robots. Now, I know that robots in the automobile industry, they actually eliminated wasted labor capacity, freeing it up for other tasks. And I'll have you switch to the next slide, James. So using robots allowed us to spend our workers to spend their time on things that required specialized knowledge and skills. And the right sales tools are like robots. They automate certain processes, freeing salespeople to spend more time on the value-added activities. And social selling is a value-added activity. It requires an advanced selling skill set. It requires a level of emotional intelligence. And it's really where the art of selling plays a strong role. If you can deploy the right automation tools, social selling is a great way to optimize both your sales craftsmanship and your sales capacity. The social selling tools salespeople need are the ones that identify the right person to talk with at the right time and with the right message. And these are what I call the 3 W's. On the next slide, we talk about the who, when, and what. So if you ask your salespeople, or ask yourself, do you want your salespeople spending their time researching this information? Remember, they have limited sales capacity. Or do you want that information to be readily available to them when and where they need it during the sales manufacturing process? Now, Lori's already mentioned some great tools like LinkedIn and Twitter, and those are wonderful social selling tools. But the more they can automate the sales manufacturing process, the more your skilled salespeople can spend producing sales. So I haven't told our hosts this, so I hope they don't mind, but I want to use OneSource's iSell as an example because it really fits this model perfectly. What they do is equivalent to moving information down the production line so that the right information arrives at the salesperson at the right time in the sales process. It delivers dynamically hot prospects to every rep based on their unique territory and their prospect criteria. It also has a unique sales intelligence gathering capability powered by sales triggers. So it automatically alerts reps to key sales driving events like a change in ownership or a company restructuring. And those are the triggers that indicate when a prospect is more open to a sales call. So again, salespeople shouldn't have to manually fetch this information. With iSell, it comes to them when the time is right. And then finally, iSell delivers the third W to salespeople so they can actually know what to say to get the prospect to engage. It delivers relevant news stories, trade articles, SEC filings, industry trends, a whole bunch of types of information that can be helpful for a sales rep right to the sales rep's desktop. I kind of think of it as a command central that it's giving reps all the prospect information they need at their fingertips. Another great social selling tool is 22Touch. Relationships don't develop overnight, and if you want to turn a contact into a sale, you have to establish some level of trusted relationship. 22Touch automates that process. Reps just follow a formula, a standardized formula of interaction that includes handwritten notes, phone calls, emails, and face-to-face contact. The goal is to require less than 10 minutes a day to keep in touch in a meaningful way. And it's also a great tool for staying in touch with current customers and earning the right for referrals. Most reps, they get so busy manufacturing sales that they neglect to give to their customers. So when it's time to ask for something like a referral, it's awkward. And that's because they haven't put in the effort to earn it. So 22Touch is basically a contact scheduling system that tells reps what to do and when to build relationships. And it's a great example of automating the social selling process. So I'll have you go to the next slide, James. So with all of that in mind, there are some important things to keep in mind when developing social selling tools, deploying social selling tools in your sales manufacturing process. So I'll go over a few of those. First off, don't leave it up to your salespeople to craft their own social selling strategy. Come up with a unified strategy that's designed to lessen the percent of sales capacity that's spent on non-selling activities. Your individual reps won't be able to figure out how to do that on their own. Also, don't equate social selling with social networks, because social networks should just be leveraged as part of your social selling strategy. They shouldn't be the strategy. Next, do assess your strategy's impact on overall selling capacity. The main question to ask is, will it result in a net decrease in wasted effort, or will it introduce a drain on your sales capacity in an equal amount? And finally, do acknowledge that social selling is a value-added activity. It gets reps in the door. It builds relationships. It wins deals, and it earns reps the right to ask for the referral. So that's it for my session. James?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nancy. Again, we're going to have some roundtable discussion here and answer some Q&A at the end. And I look forward to having you participate in that as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce our last speaker for today. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Farrington, as we said, CEO, Top Sales World. Jonathan?
Yes, thanks very much, James. I should begin really by explaining to everyone that's joined the webinar that agitated cursor that you're watching flying around the screen actually isn't. We've had violent storms here in Paris over the last 4 days, and as a consequence, 90% of the insect life in northern France made a run for it. They're just emerging again. So actually what you are witnessing is a very rare Parisian fly. So please don't be, don't be concerned by it. I think Laurie and Nancy, as always, made excellent points, and there will be a couple of points that I have to really, I think, reiterate. But if we could go to the first slide, James. You can use your cursor. So how can social media improve my communication with my existing clients and customers? You see, my big concern is this. I think that so many people, and we could use 80%, and I regularly use 80%, the 80-20 rule or Pareto's principle. I think that, in fact, most people are using social media for prospect attraction and to win new business. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But you see, the challenge is that if you speak to most CEOs, they will tell you that, broadly speaking, 80% of their business on an annual basis comes from existing clients. So I do worry that in this almost indecent haste to win more business and to attract new clients and to put all our resources into business development, we're actually neglecting the people that want to deal with us on a regular basis and who have actually got us where we are today, and that's our existing client base. So I am concerned. I mean, I'm also very focused on the fact that we should use social media to nurture and to extend our contact base and to win increased business from our existing clients. And after all, and you've probably heard this information before, it's almost become a cliche, it costs 15 times less to sell to an existing customer as it does to first attract, or first identify, then attract, then qualify, then sell to a new customer. And you know, the pure maths really present us with a no-brainer argument. So social media does give us this opportunity to communicate more easily with our existing clients simply because of the tools that are available to us. The old ways of communicating via the telephone have really become sort of, you know, almost outdated simply because it's so difficult to get through to most people because of voicemails. And that's if you can get through the, you know, the guard on the gate, as it were, receptionists and secretaries and personal assistants if they still exist. And therefore, I think by communicating with our clients using the same bases that they're using, for example, LinkedIn is excellent, of course, and I quite often bump into my existing clients in LinkedIn groups. Twitter's also good for communication. Facebook, I am a little skeptical. It's only because my clients and my prospects really don't frequent Facebook, other than using it for the same reasons I do, which is to sort of once a week pop over and find out what my children have been up to. But you have to, what's important is it's horses for courses, and you have to be around, you have to be seen and heard in the places that your prospects and clients are. And I'll, you know, make further comment on that point a little later on. If we could go to the next slide, James. So I also believe, and I'm living proof of that, that using social selling tools does save us time and it improves efficiency. Now, 2 years ago, we moved our entire consultancy online. I mean, it was fairly radical, but we did give our client base a 2-year warning, and we gradually weaned them off the need to see us face-to-face. The big plus for them, of course, they weren't paying huge hotel bills and flight costs, etc., etc. So it has turned out as a win-win. And we meet up once a year to have full reviews and strategy meetings and everything else. But everything else, the consultancy, the training, the coaching, the counseling, the online meetings are exactly that. They're all online using the latest technology and the latest social media tools. And that in itself, I think should indicate to you the amount of savings that we're making. And the amount of calls that I can take in any one day has increased. Of course, the amount of people that I can connect with in any one day has increased. And overall, our profitability has never been stronger. And I have to say that that is largely due to making that transition online. Now, I'm not suggesting, excuse me, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute, nor that face-to-face selling is going to, be consigned to the annals of history. That isn't the case at all. At the top end, 20%, I would suggest there will always be a need for some level of education and some face-to-face interaction, of course. But the migration is happening from outside sales to inside sales. That's not to suggest that so many outside salespeople are becoming inside salespeople. That is happening. But actually, what is happening more and more is that outside salespeople are making more of their calls and doing more business online than ever before. So in some respect, they're becoming outside inside salespeople, if you can imagine that. So I think I would summarize this by saying when you're thinking about your social media strategy, when you're thinking about the social selling tools that you should be using, you should be identifying what is specific for you and your company and your team, and bear in mind that you're looking, obviously, your end result has to be to win more business, but equally to win more business from your internal customers, increase efficiency, and increase profitability. Thank you, James. Next slide, please. And we've talked about this really. I think within the next, with the last slide. I mean, impacting bottom line profit is clearly something that actually happens. And the other point that I should have made slightly earlier. I mean, both Nancy and Laurie mentioned blogs, and I've been blogging now. I've been posting to my blog for almost 7 years, which is quite a long time. That's almost 2,000 posts. And when we're talking about communicating with our clients, I mean, certainly my clients, and many of my clients, almost most of my clients, read my blog. They don't necessarily read it every day, but they'll catch up with it at weekends. And that's another way in which I communicate with them. And of course, I make sure that those blog posts appear on all of the, all of the LinkedIn groups that are relevant for me. So, that's just another advantage of blogs, and really underlines exactly what Laurie was recommending. Thank you, James. I think that we as sellers have almost become slightly arrogant in the respect that we are choosing which social media platforms to appear on, which LinkedIn groups to join, which tools we're going to use, and and it's rare, I think, in my experience, for anyone to say to our clients or our customers, "Where are you? Where are you in this great big social media stratosphere? Because I'd like to be there too." I think we kind of blindly accept that, if we're going to be there, they'll pitch up. And that isn't the case at all. I think it's so important to have dialogue with all of your existing client base, and just to sort of keep up to date, and also find out what they're doing and which platforms and which tools they're using. Nancy mentioned using OneSource to provide information and intelligence for sales reps in order to win new business, and I think her emphasis was more on winning new business. For me and for my team, we use OneSource simply to keep up to date with what our clients are doing. Of course, we've got great relationships with them all, and because we're talking to them regularly, very regularly, we know most of what's going on in their company. But it's a great sanity check, and it's a great sort of way of just absolutely making sure we do know what's going on. And that's what OneSource provides us with. And in that respect, for us, it's absolutely spot on. Thank you, James. So really, where are your customers hanging out? And I think so much wasted time is spent by salespeople hanging out where they don't really need to. And again, I highlight the need to make sure you're where your customers are. I mean, if they're not on Twitter, and I think certainly in Northern Europe and probably the rest of Europe, the uptake to join Twitter and get involved with Twitter has been more slow, I would say. That's probably the polite way of putting it. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that over here we're all Luddites, far from it. But the uptake has been slow, and in fact the uptake in all social media aspects has been slow, but it's happening. And I think you just need to focus and use the selling time that you've got wisely, because as Nancy pointed out and illustrated so well, selling time is becoming limited, and it's absolutely crucial that we all use it well. And be where your customers and prospects are likely to be has to be a mantra we all need to work to. I think overall we should be very, very excited. I mean, social selling and social media in general has changed the way we sell. And it is probably the main reason why we've seen more change in the last 3 years within the sales space than we've seen in the previous 50. And it's only going to keep changing. And I think the message for all of us is to embrace it. You can't fight it, of course, and it's exciting. And we know that what's going to come next is going to be so much better than what came before. It's always been like that, and it always will be. Okay, thank you, James.
Thank you, Jonathan. Before we are going to have a roundtable, we've got some questions. I just wanted to remind everyone at the end of this webinar, there's going to be a short survey, and if you complete the survey, there's a chance to win 1 free month of ISL. So I would highly encourage you to do that. With that, again, I want to thank again Nancy and Jonathan and Lori, and let's go ahead and dive into some of the questions that I've seen. So the first question I have for all three of you, actually, it was really interesting listening to you talk about social selling and listening to you talk about social selling, social for acquisition, social for nurturing, social for brand and awareness and thought leadership. I guess the question to all three of you is, do you really perceive that social selling, what does it mean to you? Does it touch everything?
If I may, I'll take that first. Yes, it does. It's fully embracing. And I think the part that you missed out there, James, was customer retention. And, as I hope I managed to highlight in my presentation, retaining our customers and developing our customers is absolutely critical to any successful organization. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it is fully embracing. I cannot think of an area of commercial business where social media and social selling, it doesn't touch.
Lori, Nancy, anything else?
Agree.
Yeah, and this is Nancy, and I agree that it can be used throughout the entire production of a sale, if you will, to continue my analogy. But I would just caution people that you need a strategy, because there's so many tools out there and so many ways for people to be spending their time that you need to, at minimum, know how to measure what's working and what isn't working. But in the best case scenario, you would put a plan in place and then measure it over time.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It's the challenge is when you see salespeople that are kind of floundering because they don't know what to do next, and so they'll either not do it at all or waste valuable time that they can't get back.
And so one of the obvious questions that comes to my mind is the way that you communicate in social engagement for acquisition might be completely different than the way that you engage in social selling for nurturing, which might be completely different than the way that you communicate and engage for retention. Are any one of you aware of any references or any training that can be done for people to learn the right approach and the right, how active you are and the way that you participate in the appropriate way in those different ways that you're applying social selling to the marketplace?
Well, there's certainly a lot out that's available on how to use LinkedIn in the right way. And I would recommend that people check out an ebook on the subject written by a friend of mine, Jim Keenan, and you can find that over at asalesguy.com. And so I would recommend that as kind of a boilerplate on how to use LinkedIn.
Well, this is Lori. I'll add that marketing should give some direction to this, and if you have a robust marketing team that can help let the sales folks know, what we're talking about for different areas. For existing customers, this is our message. For new customers and buyers that are out there looking, there's some other language that we want to use, and I think a good marketing team can help support that effort.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, this is Jonathan. I agree entirely with Laurie. But what's interesting, Laurie during her presentation made the point that she experimented. She took time out or invested time to see what works and what doesn't work. And I think because of all of this is so new to so many sales teams and so many salespeople, that yeah, I think it's good. It's very, very good to experiment, and that's certainly what I've done. I mean, it just goes to prove that even at my age, you can learn new stuff and you can find your way around and become as proficient as you possibly can. Excuse me.
So one of the questions that came through was around what are the biggest barriers to adoption of social selling? What do you have some suggestions on what are some of the active challenges and so forth to get an organization to embrace and adopt it to the sales team?
I think that this is Jonathan again. I think if we remember that something like, and I got this figure from Nancy about 5 years ago, 99.1% of organizations around the world employ less than 100 people. So what you have to consider is that often there is a cost impact to buying in social media tools or social selling tools and software, etc. That may be one barrier, but I think generally speaking, I think that in an organization, it's my experience, in an organization, if you get 2 or 3 people within a sales team who are actually adopting and embracing a concept, which social media is, and they're succeeding with it, then any sort of Luddites or resistors that remain tend to think, okay, well, if it's working for them, it'll work for me.
And I would also posit that salespeople follow the money, as we all know, and they should. So if a tool or a process is helping them increase business, then they will use it. If they don't feel like they're getting something out of it for their efforts, then they won't use it. So the key will be to, again, pick the right tools, help them, educate them as to how it can help, find easy ways. Lori mentioned, I think, I forget how she put it, but about, starting, crawl, walk, run. I'll just put it that way, right? So find an easy way to start to engage through social selling so that you have an early success. That part's very important as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm looking here. I don't see any other questions. Nancy?
I saw a question earlier on, James, from Hugh. And he asks, our organization is very focused on its social selling strategy, but there is resistance. How do you suggest bringing the active challengers on board? I guess to a certain extent, we've answered that. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add.
Yeah, I would just say, as you mentioned, Jonathan, sometimes even in a larger organization, a subgroup, a team, or even an individual can have such great success that it will spread throughout the company, and that's how I've seen social tools come into a number of organizations I've been around. And so I would find ways to try things out, as we were talking about. and make those 1% improvement gains on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good advice. If you don't mind, James, I was going to ask Nancy as the expert. How does an organization decide what sales tools, what social media tools it needs? How do they actually, choose amongst this plethora of opportunities?
Well, that is a really good question. Thanks for throwing me a softball there. The
I owe you one.
is it's not easy. There is so many tools out there, and of course, that's partly why I started Smart Selling Tools so many years ago, is to help people navigate through the plethora of tools. I mean, we know there's way more than 100 CRM systems, for example. So there's lots of sales or social tools coming out as well. I would say, attend webinars to educate yourself. Download some ebooks to educate yourself. Start with thinking through your own process and what you need, and then go out and look for the right tools to match that. So is it that you're having a hard time remembering who you should be staying in contact and when? Is it that you're having a hard time figuring out who's the right contact, or how to learn a little something about them so that you can engage them in a conversation? Figure out what those barriers are that you have, and then go look for the tools, not the other way around.
Do you advocate taking professional advice, Nancy? I mean, really sort of bringing a consultant in, or at least speaking to people that know exactly what they're talking about before you start investing all this money?
Well, I certainly would. If you have, if you have the cash flow to do that. For the smaller companies, they just might not have the cash flow as much as they'd like to. So
Right.
for those folks, I'd say, do what I just suggested. First identify what your barriers are, and then go out and do the research. But there's so many great experts out there that spend all their time figuring out the best way to utilize social selling, and so definitely, if you can, engage them.
And Jonathan, what people do now is they go online and they ask other people, just like in social selling.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And right at the front of this presentation, James mentioned one set of statistics, that buyers are coming in at 60% up the food chain. And yeah, that's right. I mean, I've even seen 70%. And so, we accept that they're coming in more intelligently, and they're not needing us for all that sort of front-end foreplay and information that they used to in sort of years gone by. But equally, I think this was the point that I wanted to make, was that we actually are equally armed, because we can actually respond equally intelligently, because we've just got so much more information on their companies now too.
Yes, and what people think they need sometimes is not what they actually need. That's what I find a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's
so the education piece. Yeah,
absolutely right. James?
Yeah, I was going to say that I was just going to add one thing, and that is the thing that I'm really focused on from a marketing standpoint relative to social is trying to, again, measure every engagement and trying to correlate that engagement back to what it means in terms of qualified leads, qualified opportunities, and revenue. And again, I think that there's been a lot of advancement that's taken place recently in terms of having more thorough capability of measuring the social engagement and correlating that all the way through the life cycle for the sales engagement to ROI. And that's, I think, when we really talk about when this is really going to take off, as a marketer, I've already seen a significant more response rate and higher response rate from marketing in the social networks than I did 12 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from a marketing perspective, I hear where you're coming from. Excuse me. As a CEO, I definitely highlight the fact that I want to see an ROI, and I want to see an end result, most definitely. Incidentally, we've just had another question in. You may not be seeing these, James. I'm helping you out here. I'm quite happy to be #1 assistant tonight. Jacob asks, you mentioned that Facebook doesn't work well for B2B, but what if you target mainly customers that are B2C to show them the advantage of Facebook and other social media to attract new customers? If I may provide the first response, because I think this was probably something I said. The reality, Jacob, is that yes, in my experience, and I was very keen to highlight the fact that my clients and my prospects don't use Facebook, but absolutely for B2C, I mean, a lot of my good friends run organizations that do sell to consumers, and they are enjoying so much success with Facebook. So yeah, in a B2C environment, absolutely. Don't know if the girls want to add anything to that.
I would just add that
maybe one at a time.
I had a B2B client who sells packaging to companies that sell, coffee equipment and coffee accessories. So depending on the type of B2B, it definitely can work.
And I was about to say that I'm out of my league when it comes to B2C because it's just not an area that I follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me too. But I'm quite interested to see general market trends and impact. And there's no doubt about it that social selling has had a huge impact in the B2C arena. I mean, imagine 5 years ago somebody said to you, okay, I'm going to start this company. It's going to be called Amazon. And I'm going to sell all sorts of things, but I'm not going to employ any salespeople whatsoever. And we'd have said, yeah, right. Now look at them.
People laughed for years about Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm from the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, and I remember all the laughing.
Yeah. No, I think there's a signpost there for all of us, and maybe the signpost is also there for B2B.
Well, I want to thank, again, our guest speakers today. Thank you so much, Jonathan, Nancy, Lori. It was a pleasure having you today. And hopefully, for those that attended the webinar, I hope you found this to be very valuable. I hope that you got some great insights. And again, one last reminder, please complete the survey for a chance to win a free month of iSell. And with that, thank you so much.